Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us here for this session, Documentaries and Me, with Professor Green. I'm Damian Kavanagh, the controller of BBC Three, and I really want BBC Three to be the home of modern factual content that speaks to a young audience. On BBC Three, we are always going to back ideas that stimulate strong emotions and provoke reactions in our audience. We want pieces that make the audience think. We want films with a real sense of purpose about them, and it's this ambition that has led us to work with Professor Green, who so far has made 3 films for us and hopefully more on the pipeline. So with no further ado, I just want to introduce the man himself, Professor Green. Professor Green has had an amazing and varied career. He broke into the music biz after being signed by the Streets vocalist Mike Skinner's label The Beats in 2008. He's amassed over 3 million sales since his debut album Alive Till I'm Dead. He's also won and been nominated for a host of awards, including Breakthrough Artist at the BT Digital Music Awards, an MTV EMA, an NME Award, 3 Urban Awards, 3 Mobos. Recently released his autobiography, Lucky, which spent 2 weeks in the Sunday Times bestseller list and charts his very colourful past and rise to fame. He has worked with some of the UK's top talent, Lily Allen, an example. Professor Green is truly a part of UK rap royalty and has an entourage to match. I'm also joined here today by Danny Horan. Danny works with me in the BBC Documentaries team. He joined last September, and his focus is on BBC Two and Three. He recently commissioned the new series of Louis Theroux for BBC Two, as well as an ambitious series about the NHS. For Three, Danny has commissioned films with Professor Green, a feature-length documentary coming up about gun crime in the USA, as well as The Last Days of Legal Highs and Chasing Dad. Prior to joining the BBC, Danny was an executive producer at Voltage TV and The Garden, where he's responsible for The Audience, Tatler, and the Cutting Edge films. As a director, he made the brilliant Louis Theroux film about America's medicated kids. Series directed The Tube and has several singles for BBC Two and Channel 4 under his belt. I'd like to introduce you as well to Leila Monks. Set up Antitode in 2015 with her business partner, Laura Jones. She has developed and executive produced all of the Professor Green documentaries that we've done on BBC Three. All of the Professor Greens that we've done, and she looks after Antidote's other output. She began her career in distribution, then moved into production, and has a proven track record in originating ideas for commission and raising finance for shows, strong relationships with all the major commissioning editors and buyers in the UK, US, Canada, Australia, and Europe. So we're going to have a conversation here first, and then I'm going to open it up at the end to questions from the audience. So if you've any questions, we can take those. So Stephen, you have had, as I said, a very successful and very varied career. I think, when I read your books and I listen to your music and see your documentaries, there feels to be a lot of yourself in the work that you do, and it seems to kind of be quite heavily inspired by your past. Do you want to just talk to us a little bit about your upbringing and the things that influenced you?
Yeah, I think, my upbringing started 1983. I was born on the 27th of November and lived in a little council flat in Upper Clapton. There were 6 of us in that 3-bedroom flat. There was my great-grandmother, her daughter, my grandmother, her daughter, my mother, my 2 uncles, and little old me.
Busy house.
It was a busy flat.
Slowly
but surely, everyone started to leave. My mother was the first to leave when I was a year old. My dad was in and out of my life, and it was quite, that typical council flat story of not quite 2.4 children, broken family. But I was lucky, I had love and support at home. It's a lot easier to see how lucky I was now. At the time, I just wanted mum and dad, and to not be questioned at school. Why is your mum so old?
Right.
Well, it's my nan.
Okay.
Why don't you live with your parents? Do they not want you? Quite a hard question to answer when you're a kid. But I was a bright kid. I was quite academic. Strangely, never that creative. I didn't have any form of artistic expression until I started writing music when I was 18. I didn't really make the most of my abilities at school. I stopped going to school at 13, which was also the same year that my great-grandmother passed away.
And you think the two were related?
Definitely, yeah, because she was the one that made learning fun for me. I read well ahead of my years because she made that fun for me. She was like, my next album's going to be called The Blue Blanket, and that refers to the blue blanket which she had on a fold-out armchair, which was also a bed in our living room, which I used to run and jump underneath when I was a kid. That was my safe place.
Yeah.
And that was where she taught me to read, basic numeracy, you know what I mean? And because that was like my favourite place ever to be, that, you know, I found learning fun. So I wanted to, and I wanted to please people. I think, you know, we all search for validations, and where I grew up, a lot of people end up looking for it in the wrong places. Yeah. But I was fortunate in that, you know, I was rewarded for doing things well that were positive things.
Yeah. And she gave you your love of storytelling.
Yes.
And so when you, with your love of storytelling, what came first for you? Was it the music, or was it the stories you told via the music that you produced?
It was the music, yeah. My nan used to play a lot of terrible music, Engelbert Humperdinck and...
Nothing wrong with that. Joking.
Yeah, trust me. Some of my mates had much cooler parents. She, you know, loads of Jason Donovan and Cardi. It was bad.
Also not bad.
It was bad, man. I actually bumped into Jason Donovan at a service station. That was quite funny. I kind of wanted to have a go at him, actually, for giving me such a tormented childhood, but no, it was nice. But playing out in the flats, you know, East London, it was a very multicultural environment. And so I was lucky enough to take influence from a lot of different music that I heard from like my friends' houses and stuff. But the first music that I really got into was jungle. That was massive in East London.
Yeah, yeah.
And then after that, I heard the One More Chance remix by Biggie at Roller City in Edmonton, where we used to go and play Bulldog on our skates and stuff. And I just wanted to find out what it was and who it was by, and I did. And that started my love for rap music. Yeah. But the artists that I favoured, there was always, you know, you're saying about I put a lot of my life in my stories. I think most of the artists that I favoured have done that. Yeah. And were also quite, even though Biggie was American, and, you know, quite often the Americans don't share the British sense of humour, he was quite self-deprecating. You know, he wasn't as serious as he was and as flamboyant as he was, and it was all, you know, he was quite dark at times, but he was able to make light of quite dark situations, and I think I definitely took that on board as well.
You talk in your biography about that artists that you admire and stuff that you think really, really cuts through, has a real sense of the artist and their life in it. You talk about The Drugs Don't Work and, you know, the Verve song.
Yeah. I like, well, that's an amazing song because the song, you know, that song was about his father. Yeah. Who was terminally ill, and it was a case of the drugs don't work. You know, like a cat in a bag waiting to drown, this time I'm coming down. But to a lot of people, that song, I think a lot of people felt that song was about addiction or his own drug use. And I love it when a song can, it's why I'm not a fan of explanations. You know, you shouldn't really tell someone what songs should mean to them. And so to a lot of people, that song meant a lot of different things. And for a song that, I mean, it's a sad subject, but it cut through. So I thought, there was a TV show where I said that was my favourite #1 record ever. And I remember the host being quite surprised. That was #1. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing song. You talk about working as well in the book. You talk about really, really hard for all the things that you've achieved in your life. What made you, and what was the moment where you decided, I'm absolutely obsessed with music and I want to do it? What's the moment that you decided you were going to do it and you put yourself out there?
Probably when I got my neck tattooed.
Yeah?
I wasn't gonna... Yeah, there wasn't much... Well, no, just there wasn't much chance of a proper job after that, was there?
Now I understand.
That was at the age of 24.
At the age of 24?
Yeah.
So it was the tattoo a kind of, it forces me down this route?
Kind of, yeah. And, I mean, it's weird, because there must have been, you know, I'm quite hard on myself, and I suffer a lot of self-doubt, but I've used that to drive me. It's weird, because I could never tell if it was just blind stupidity that kept me going, or if it was a little bit of persistence and inner self-belief somewhere. Yeah. But I knew it was something that I wanted to do deep down, so I cracked on, and like it didn't work for a long time. You know, there were moments when it looked like it was going to, you know, when I signed to Mike Skinner's record label, and there were incredible moments all along the way, but there were some incredibly tough times. You know, when Mike Skinner's record label went under before my album came out, I couldn't get my music back from Warner. They were a subsidiary of Warner. Right. So I couldn't get my music back, so I couldn't release music. Right. So I went back to...
So they owned the publishing rights to your music?
They owned the music.
The music, okay.
We got it back after a year, but in that year, I went back to doing naughty things because that was what I knew.
Yeah.
But that also enabled me to make music at the same time. So it was the only way I could carry on doing what I wanted to.
Yeah.
And there were times when I just wanted to throw it all in.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
And then I guess what a lot of people here will know you for is your documentary "Suicide and Me."
Yeah.
Incredibly brilliant, very, very personal film. Do you want to talk to us about how you moved into that world and why you decided you want to tell that story?
I think this should start with Leila.
Yeah, well, we hadn't really, Antitode was kind of being set up at this point, and we went into BBC Three to have a meeting about something completely different with a commissioner there called Elliot Reid, and he was telling us that, what BBC Three were really looking for was kind of big national issues and sort of people that could kind of take their audience, which is obviously a younger audience, through those issues. And I'd heard Stephen on the radio talking about his dad's suicide, and I thought that would be, that could be a really sort of special film. So I said to Elliot, what about Professor Green on suicide? And he said that would be incredible if he would be interested. And we had no connection to Stephen at the time. So we went away and sort of called his record label and then met his management and then met Stephen. And it kind of all went from there. I mean, I think it was a huge exercise in trust because, this was such a personal film for Stephen to do. And, he didn't know us really at that point. And also the BBC didn't really know us in terms of, as a company, we didn't have a track record. So it's a kind of huge sort of privilege and huge sort of responsibility to take that film on. And I knew every time I had a meeting with Stephen about the film, I just had this sort of feeling inside that this could be something really special. But I didn't know then sort of how special and how big it would be. And I think, it's a testament to sort of Stephen really sort of putting himself out there that really did make the film what it was.
Did the film change along the way and from the planning in terms of how much of yourself you put into it, or were you willing to do that from the get-go?
No.
No.
That was actually something I wasn't willing to do
Okay.
from the get-go. But as we started to film, it was meant to be a really broad look on male suicide, not so much my own personal story, but as we were probably a couple of weeks into filming, and I believe you'd seen some of the footage, and it became clear that was going to be the most powerful story. So at that point, I had to make a decision as to whether or not I was okay with putting myself out there. And I'll be honest, I didn't want to. That film showed a side of me that I don't see much myself.
Okay.
And I was quite uncomfortable with that side of me being shown to a world.
Why were you uncomfortable about it? Is it?
But that's what made me change my mind and put it out, because I realised that that's actually a huge part of the problem with male suicide and male depression and men not talking about things, because men want to appear a certain way. We have to be hard.
Yeah.
There's a lot of social pressure to be so. And I think slowly that's changing, but that was really what, I was working that out that made me say, do you know what, sod it, let's do it.
Yeah. And how difficult was it to approach members of your family, some of whom you hadn't spoken to since your father's death, to ask them to take part in the film?
Do you know what? When my dad passed away, when he took his own life, I just I cut myself off from not just, I wasn't in touch with those members of my family. I wasn't in touch with my dad at the time. But I cut myself off from a lot of people to kind of get my shit together. And I had to focus on myself. And I know that sounds selfish, but I had to be. But my aunt works in Hoxton, which is around the corner from where my aunt Debbie lives. And she dropped a letter into her, and I never read it. It was given to me, but I kept it. And it just, I don't know, my great-grandmother used to say nothing before it's time. And it just felt like it was the right time to reach out, and without her involvement, the film wouldn't have been what it was, and now we are back in touch. So I have new members of my family, well, not new, but you know what I mean?
We're just going to show a clip. I think we've got a clip of the opening of that film, just to remind people. And in the film, there's incredible scenes with Nanny Pat. She was a big influence on your life.
Yeah, massive. I don't know where I would have ended up if I didn't have her potentially in care.
Yeah.
And for her to take on the responsibility of looking after the child of her child, having brought up 3 children and looking after her mum, a testament to what a strong and brilliant woman she is.
Yeah.
but it was, you know, it was hard at home. It wasn't necessarily it wasn't always a happy place, you know. She was stressed. She was working 3 jobs a day to try and put food on the table for everyone and to support everyone. So I was left in the care of my great-grandmother for a lot of that time because I took a lot of time off school. But yeah, my nan's a special woman.
She is a very special woman. I know I'm going to play 2 clips very close to each other, but there's a very moving clip here when you're having a conversation with Nanny Pa. You talk in your in the book, in your biography, about the film bringing up a lot of emotions that you hadn't resolved with. How do you feel after making the film that they're resolved, or?
No, I think they have less power over me. Yeah. I can watch that now and not burst into tears, you know what I mean? But I think the most important lesson that I learned from it was that you just have to be comfortable with those feelings. Like, it's always going to be upsetting. And there's always going to be a time when I'm at a low and I stumble over a picture and it upsets me. But it's okay to be upset.
Yes.
That's you know, it's healthy to be.
Yeah.
And I think what was probably quite unhealthy about what I was doing prior to that was just bottling it up.
Yeah.
But then it comes back to stiff British upper lip, didn't it? That was the first time, really, I ever discussed that with my nan.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the programme was, you know, I didn't do it for any kind of personal benefit, but there was some, because we wouldn't have had that conversation, because this, you know, life is busy as it is, you know what I mean? You've got so much going on in front of you, you don't really tend to look back and bring those things up, and I don't see my nan as often as I'd like to, so when I do see her, I don't go, Nan, can we talk about my dad's suicide, please?
Yeah.
You don't, but it's important that you do speak about those things, especially with the people that are that close to you.
And were you, after the film went out, with friends of yours who you may not have opened up to, you know, as much, when they saw the film, how did people relate to you? What's your feedback been?
I'm really fortunate. I've got some really close friends, and we do talk about a lot of stuff. But there was, you know, some of my closest friends. It helped them to understand certain things because there was a lot that wasn't spoken about. And probably to have a better grasp on why I am the way I am sometimes. Yeah,
and with the people in the film, the contributors in the films, do you keep in touch? Do you still? I know you're involved with CAM, but with the likes of the Maytree Trust and people like that, do you keep in touch?
There's been we've done little bits and bobs of work for certain charities, mostly though because being a patron of CAM, that's where, you know, that's where most of my, not loyalty, you know, but I do most of my work for CAM. I keep in touch with someone from the homelessness documentary, Luke, who I'm sure people will see surely, who I keep in touch with.
Yeah. I just want to bring in Danny and Leila to talk about, you know, just developing ideas for talent like Stephen, and what the process is and what kind of conversations you have and how you go about it.
Well, I think a lot of the ideas that we sort of come up with, there's always a why now question. You know, with suicide, that statistic, that it's the biggest killer of men under 45 was such a shocker for everyone, I think, involved. And it kind of, this film has to be made. Stephen was really up for doing a documentary about homelessness. That was his idea. He was really keen to do that. And it's kind of about us. It's up to us to kind of find a way to make a film in that area that would kind of, you know, with all of these films, it's kind of about sort of challenging people's perceptions. And changing the way people think about things. And I think with homelessness, that was a very different type of film to suicide. Obviously, suicide was the personal journey, whereas homelessness is more of a kind of experiential film, you know, sort of character-based. So it's really important for us to find, you know, the right people that could sort of help us sort of, you know, talk about the issues and that Stephen would connect with. And then it's a lot of conversations with, obviously, Danny about the direction that the film takes and, you know, do you want...
Well, I think, you know, it's the suicide film's obviously really personal, which is why originally, I mean, I didn't originally commission that, by the way, it was Elliot Reed, as you said, Leila, but I think post-suicide went out, we were looking at what else we could do with you. I don't think there was a plan of like, oh, let's do a load of Professor Green films. We thought, let's do the suicide one, see how it goes. And of course, it's so personal. You did an amazing job, not just with your own story, but actually with the people that you encountered. And then I suppose that we wanted to look at areas that you were interested in, and also you've got a sort of campaigning spirit about you, I think, in a way. And I think that, you know, if you think about the suicide film was shown in Parliament, you had a screening in Parliament, and I think we're trying to do similar things, you know, with the next round of films that we're trying to get away, which we should come on to later. But if we can make that part of the film, is also quite a good thing. You've got that in you to be. Yeah. What legacy will this film have beyond the transmission of the program, actually?
Which was crazy, because it just sort of, it built a life of its own, didn't it?
Yeah,
just kept going and going and going. Like, I couldn't believe the response, which was kind of a double-edged sword, because the reason it had such a response is because depression and suicide affects so many people.
Yeah.
So on one hand, it's great that it had such a far reach, but on the other hand, it's quite sad because of how many people it affects.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we're talking about, Leila and I, and other people developing ideas with you, is, you know, we're often drawn to the ideas that you do have some personal attachment to. And the great thing about you, Stephen, is also the awful thing for you growing up. Is that you touch on lots of things like, you know, child poverty, drug addiction, you know, violence, you know, suicide. So actually, there's sort of weirdly a whole wealth of ideas we can slightly, you know, that you've got a point of view on. And actually, if you, you know, lots of these ideas that we come to pitch to you, Damian, about and try and get these ideas commissioned is, you know, they're not necessarily brand new ideas about dangerous dogs that we'll speak of later, homelessness, suicide, but because of your very personal take on them, I
think we've been really fortunate with the people that we've encountered there, because they've made the films what they are. Because for me, I don't want to. So the homelessness documentary, I was petrified about doing, because the first documentary, obviously, I was shit scared about doing that as well. But it didn't feel like I was doing much presenting in that show. And in the second, I felt like I was cutting my teeth on a really big stage because of the success of the first documentary. And all of a sudden, I've got to, you know, really interview people and really get down to the nitty-gritty. And I didn't know if I'd be able to engage with people in that way. It was a completely different craft. It wasn't something I'd grown up doing. I didn't grow up in TV, you know. And even from when I started to do well, it was always music. And if I was on TV, it was Never Mind the Buzzcocks as a guest, you know. And it was completely different.
I think your rapping background, you know, if you think about what you're doing in front of the camera, it's kind of putting the right words together in the right order at the right time. You know, I think the words are just in your head and then they sort of come out, and that's really good lines.
I've been lucky just with the freedom that you've all given me, and just being able to really immerse myself in the documentaries and just engaging with people in the right way.
In your biography, it feels that there is a sense from you of pride and contentment when you got your own house, your first house. Yeah. Was you know, moving around a lot when you were younger and kind of, you know, living in different places, was that kind of what really made you want to make a film about homelessness?
Do you know what? It wasn't. I just didn't really. It was something that I'd never really given too much thought to. Was always aware of it, always saw it, but didn't really understand. And I always have time for people. I always sit and talk. You know, there's. I always forget the guy's name, but I always remember his dog on Shoreditch High Street, George, and the guy sits there and does the drawings. And I just started to think, everyone's got a story. You know, how has that person ended up there? I think once you start to humanise people as well, that's when the change comes, and people do realise that it's not just a bum, it's not just a trick. You know, once someone has a name and can be put in a box, it's quite easy to just forget about them. And they become excluded from society, which is sad.
Yeah. Well, it is. I think, and we'll show some clips in a minute, but I think, you know, when you meet Lauren in the film and you just realise how easy it is to end up on the streets. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't realise in their life. They think, I'm very comfortable, I've got a job, I've got a house, but something goes wrong, whether it's mental health issue or losing your job or anything, and they can end up on the street. I'll just show the clip with you, with Luke in McDonald's, and we'll pick up on a conversation after that. Do you feel or get a sense of guilt when you go home or go to your hotel room at the end of a day's shooting with characters like Luke?
It was weird. I wouldn't say it was guilt. It was, we'd spent hours and hours and hours that evening. We shot all through the night. It was a long shoot, innit? But he does that every night, and it was just weird because I was just hanging out with him. Yeah. So we became quite pally. Yeah. You know, he was, you know, he's a cool bloke. I still speak to him now. Yeah. And then it was just, that was the strangest moment for me, because where are you going to go? You know, I never thought about it up until that point. Because
the amazing thing is he hadn't really. He's just Market Street maybe. It's like there's no kind of plan in his mind
at all
about where he spends that night.
And when life's that chaotic, how do you start to fashion foundations to move on, to get out of that rut? And we found out in the film how nigh on impossible it's made to get out of that position.
Yeah.
And how little support there is for people in that situation.
Yeah. It's interesting in the film, and it's just to get your sense of it. And I thought you called bullshit when you needed to with Luke, and how as a filmmaker and a presenter of films like that, how do you balance that with kind of not trying to kind of push your views onto them too much? Is it a fine line you have to walk?
Do you know what? I went into it not really thinking about stuff like that, because this is not something that I've done before. I don't know, I'm just honest with people. Just straight down the line, and then it keeps it easy. The one thing I always had in my head is I never wanted to have a conversation with someone, then walk away and say something on camera, or to camera, sorry, that I never said to them. So when he smoked, the stuff that he was smoking there wasn't weed or skunk, it was this stuff called spice, it's illegal high. The rattle coming off it is worse than skag.
Yeah.
It's horrendous what it does. And every time he smoked it, it done something different to him. And we were walking through the streets, and all of a sudden, he just got really aggressive. He'd been aggressive at a shopkeeper because he didn't want to sell it to him. And then he's just walking out in the road saying that he can stop cars, and, this is his, they don't want to, they pay me no attention when they see me on the streets. They're going to pay attention. I just said, mate, you're being a dickhead. Like, you're acting like an idiot. What are you doing? Like, it pissed me off, it did. But it was honest, and I think that's how you have to. That's how I approach it. We're just trying to keep that honesty.
Yeah. It's extraordinary, and that scene in the film as well, where, as you say, when he smokes it, and he just zones out. And you're saying it's the same as the effect that people have when they take too much heroin.
way worse drugs, and when I say worse drugs, it's not even stronger, I suppose. It's just the fact that was legal, and it's the way it's legal, or was legal. But it wasn't sold legally, because these shopkeepers were only taking cash.
Yeah.
So it wasn't being bought legally, and it wasn't being sold legally. It was just labelled as legal.
Taking cash?
They would only take cash in the shop. So if you went in to buy a bag of spice, you had to pay cash, and that money went in a separate box. So very much doubt they were paying tax.
No. Well, we did a film. I don't know if people saw it on the last days of Legal Highs, and in that film, it was just. There's not a lot of science about how they mix those drugs together. It's basically just 2 scoops into a plastic bag and shake and spray.
And then they got away with it by saying it's not for human consumption. It was potpourri or whatever it was marketed as. Yeah. But I mean, you must have to have it must be short on conscience to be able to sell that, knowing what it's doing to people.
Exactly. We've got a clip of Lauren from Hidden and Homeless as well. And were you shocked when you were making that film about the hidden homelessness that existed, the idea of a mum and her young daughter sofa surfing and...
Yeah, and also the fact that you would walk past them in the street and never think that they were homeless. And that was the same with a lot of people. And I mean, they don't count the homeless properly on the streets. There's certain criteria that they have to meet when the councils are out doing their checks. If someone is not asleep in their sleeping bag, if they're sitting up, then they're not counted as homeless. So we're not getting anywhere near honest figures. And when they're not counting people of no fixed address, we're not getting anywhere close to the figure of the amount of people who are actually homeless, which means that we're definitely not getting the money spent on solving this problem either.
Yeah. It's, and I just want to talk, you've just, we haven't published it yet, but you've just made a fantastic film for us about dangerous dogs. Do you just want to, Leila, do you want to talk, and Danny, about how that film came about first, and then we can talk about the film?
How did the film come about? So we, I mean, again, it's another area that is, you've got experience of, in a way, having what some might see as a dangerous dog yourself. I know he's not, but if you walk in the park...
Can be if he don't know you and you climb over my fence. No, I'm joking.
But actually, the thing is, the reason why we do all these films in a way is because there is usually a backstory to them, which is based on something that is happening. Like the stats have gone up. So, for example, in the last year, there's been 27, is that right, in the last 10 years?
Yes, in the last 10 years, 27 people have been killed. But I think the number of dog attacks has gone up 7 times.
So the number of dog attacks has gone up in the last. But 25 years ago, it's 25th year this year. The anniversary of the Dangerous Dogs Act was brought in, and so the question really was: is it relevant? Because the government at the time banned 4 breeds, and actually they are not the dogs that are the ones that are most responsible for dog attacks. So we sort of thought, there's something in that. Stephen's got a really dangerous dog.
Vicious little.
I think it's another one of those kind of contentious issues.
Yeah.
There's sort of a lot of press, and it kind of touches on bigger questions about sort of class and people who are kind of disadvantaged or demonised, and they're all sort of areas that Stephen is really passionate about. And obviously we knew he was a dog lover, and I think he was just really keen to sort of talk about the Dangerous Dogs Act and get his views across.
I wanted to explore, what it was it working, and what's the problem really? Is the Dangerous Dogs Act the problem? Is it the dogs? Is it the people? And that was really the starting point for the film.
We've got a clip which we can show. Do you think, from your experience and from growing up in Hackney in East London, do you think a lot of young men are really that fearful that they need a dog like that to protect them?
When you start going into people's backstories, John was put into care, and he was kicked out of care when he was 18, which, it's not hard to work out. That's when the money stops.
Yeah.
Not everyone who looks after kids does it for the right reasons. So you can imagine how vulnerable we felt anyway. And to be honest, there probably is a reason for it. For some people more than others, depending on what they're involved in, but you do feel safer. Like, I've been robbed. I probably wouldn't have had if I had a dog with me. Not that I would have trained that dog to attack, but dogs are very loyal and they're very protective. And actually, more often than anything, I think it's just a deterrent. Yeah. And dogs have been used for protection for thousands of years. It's not something new. And people tend to pick a dog that fits their lifestyle.
And from making the film, what's your sense of what the Dangerous Dog Act is actually about?
Well, it pushes pit bull breeding underground, which means it's not regulated, which probably makes it more dangerous. It hasn't helped stop the amount of dog bites that we're having, has it?
No.
Definitely hasn't. If anything, it kind of causes what it sets out to stop, if it ever did set out to stop anything.
As a dog lover, did you feel conflicted making a film like that?
No, do you know what? Not really, no, because I didn't, there were things that I didn't agree with in the film. I don't think everyone was treating their dogs correctly or as well as they should have been. What we began to uncover was just that a lot of the deaths that have resulted from dogs, well, for one, there was no weaponized dogs, which is something that you hear a lot about in the press. Demon dogs, devil dogs, pit bulls, which have been weaponized, taught to attack. They weren't responsible for the deaths. In a lot of cases, as tragic as it may be, it was quite... it was quite often dogs turning on their owners because they weren't being kept properly, they weren't being fed, they weren't being walked. There was a Jack Russell that killed a baby. It comes down to irresponsible ownership. And irresponsible ownership can be as just keeping a dog that has become aggressive that you can't correct the behaviour of. As a responsible owner, that you need to find, if you can't help that dog's behaviour, you need to find a home for that dog and keep it out of the remit of society so as it can't hurt someone.
I think we just show a clip now that I think absolutely, highlights the perils of an irresponsible dog ownership, which is the clip with Jade's family. Do you want to just tell the audience just the backstory to what happened with Jade?
Yeah. Jade went round to a friend's house, left the friend's house there were 4 dogs in the house. 4 or 5? 5. Although one was crated, the others were out. I think it was a Mastiff and then 3 Staffordshire Bull Terriers.
No banned.
So no banned breeds, no illegal dogs. she left to go and get some food. She came back with a pie or a pasty or something from the shop and walked in with it, and the dogs had, you know, they weren't fed, they weren't walked, it turned out. And they went for the food and got her throat and then ravaged. It's, you know, they turned feral. Ultimately, they are wild animals. And as far as irresponsible ownership, I think that is probably the epitome of it, isn't it? And they lost their daughter because of... Why have 4 dogs if you can't feed or walk them? You know, and I read up on the tweets and the Facebook posts that they spoke about afterwards, and the woman was virtually boasting, you know, I don't think, I can't remember the name of the Mastiff, but I don't think he likes kids very much. And they've lost their child. And, you know, that woman couldn't be prosecuted because it happened on private property, but there's since been a change to the law, and they're partly responsible for that change in the law. They're campaigning. But, you know, later in the conversation with them, I asked them if they thought that, you know, breeds should be banned, and they said no. They've got 2 dogs themselves. So for them to have lost a daughter, and for them to not see the point in this law, and it's only Section 1 that I have a problem with, because it specifies breeds. It's breed-specific legislation. You know, Part 3 of that Section 3 is definitely relative, because you need to be able to punish people if they're not in control of their dogs and their dog does something like that.
It was quite. I was quite surprised in the film about, as well, when there are named breeds of dogs that you know, can be destroyed. How subjective the judgment on whether the dog is a banned breed or not actually is.
Also, I tell you what's crazy is just how likely you are. So there's an exemption list for pit bulls. So if you have third-party insurance for your dog, you keep it muzzled, you never let it off the lead, it's never walked by someone under 16 years of age, then there is a chance that you'll get to keep your dog. We spoke to a professor during that film, and he got a dog off of kids who were treating their dog badly. It was a pup, he didn't know what it was, but he just didn't want to see the pup treated like that, made them an offer they couldn't refuse and got the dog. Then started getting loads of, and this is a very, you know, obviously middle-class professor of criminology walking down the road in Camberwell or wherever he was from, and he's getting cars pulled over, rude boys jumping at him going, "Oh mate, your dog's amazing," like, and he's like, "Why am I getting all this attention?" And they were like, it's a red-nosed pit. He's like, "It's a Staffordshire Bull Terrier." Nah, bro, that's a pit bull. So he goes home and looks up what a pit bull is and finds out that it's a banned breed. So he did the right thing, and he went to the police and went through the courts, but that will happen quite quickly for him. And he wasn't shy to say that the reason that was also easy for him to achieve was because, 1, he had the finances to do it cost him about $4.5 grand, and 2, because he was a middle-class white man. You know, so depending on where you come from and who you are and what you're afforded and what you have, kind of dictates whether or not you'll be allowed to keep your dog. So again, it just comes down to, is this really about a breed of dog?
That's what makes the film really good, actually, is that it isn't just about banned breeds, it isn't just about ownership and versus dog, it's also about, you get into class as well, and it is, because, you know, some of the 4 banned breeds, you know, there's some dogs on there that are surprisingly not on there, and it's because they were more, at the time, were more of a sort of middle-class owned dog. I mean, so...
That's kind of what when I asked about that law, what exactly the law is targeting.
Kenneth Baker, in his autobiography, Kenneth Baker was a guy who rushed through the law, and he just says, you know, because there were Rottweilers and Dobermans, and Rottweilers were responsible for a lot of the publicised dog attacks at that time. He just said, well, I didn't want to ban them because I didn't want to upset the Green Welly Brigade.
I think we have a clip here about how they classify dogs as dangerous dogs. So if you could just play that. It's this.
Don't tell me the end.
I'm going to tell you the documentary. We'll be releasing it in I think the week after next, so you should watch it. But it's a very moving story. This woman is a recovering. She was you know, involved in a lot of substance abuse, and the dog has helped her to recovery. So I'm just adding more jeopardy to it. So you have to watch the film. It's very moving scene. I just want to move on now to what next. And what films you are looking at doing, and we're having conversations with you. And I think one of the things that we're talking about at the moment is something that has been a large part of your life. which is weed and cannabis. And we want to do a film with you exploring Professor Green.
I love getting asked that question on breakfast television. So how did you get the name Professor Green? Oh, I was a keen horticulturist.
It's horticulture of sorts.
Yeah.
Do you want to just talk to us a bit about your experience, you know, in your life and kind of, you know, both using and allowing other people to use weed and
It was a commodity, all right.
It was a commodity. And why we think a film like that is. You guys can pitch in here.
Sure.
Why a film like this is important now today.
I think there's been such a change in policy in other parts of the world, and it seems to have done good things. It creates a lot of money, you know, it boosts the economy. There's massive health benefits which are coming to light now. The medicinal use of marijuana, not for the psychoactive, but because it shrinks cancer tumours and all sorts. But me growing up, I rolled my first spliff when I was 9, under the orders of the elders on my flats. Roll me a spliff. I don't know how. Learn.
Learn.
I didn't smoke my first spliff until I was 11, and I smoked pretty much morning till night from about 13 or 14 onwards, until I was 24 when I gave up for a while.
You joke in your book about when you're giving up and that you wanted kind of more clarity and to be able to focus.
Well, it was when my dad took his own life, and somehow I had the smarts to not. I didn't want any crutches. You know, I mean, the film showed that I still didn't process everything properly. I probably still haven't, but I didn't want to go through it numbing it. I wanted to feel what I had to feel because I didn't feel that numbing it was going to do me any favours in the long run. So I stopped smoking, give or take the odd puff, for 4.5 years. And then when I went back to it, it didn't treat me the same. It did make me paranoid at times. It made me feel uncomfortable. I never really knew what I was going to get. And I think something that would be really interesting to explore is you know, commercial grade marijuana, like what's being sold on the streets, because there was a time when all the imports that I did at a point, I did sell weed for a long time and sold a lot of it. The imports that we used to get in started being sprayed with silica, you know, which leaves people with silicosis, which is irreversible. Weight.
For weight?
Yeah.
People bulking it up.
Well, you think if you're selling thousands and thousands of keys over, you know, it can make someone, a very selfish person, clearly, quite a lot of money. You know, silicosis, irreversible lung damage from smoking something that you smoke to relax, or, you know what I mean? Whereas if it was, I think the question is almost like, why don't we legalise weed? I think that's a good starting point.
You don't want to say? I
think a great starting point for the documentary would be why don't we legalise weed? I think that's a great angle for it.
Agree. Yeah, I agree. I think that's right. I think there's two reasons why we're interested. One is you're right. It's about policy, and there's lots of debate around it, and there's lots of different areas around the world which are legalising it in some states in America, etc. And I think there's a good debate to have about it, and proper, honest, healthy debate.
Yeah,
and of course,
it has to show both sides. It really does, because there is an argument for not, because there are people who have predisposed conditions which are brought out by them smoking marijuana.
Definitely.
But then I think a lot of it can depend on the quality of it, where it's coming from, and what else is in it.
Do you think some of the stuff that's out there now is too strong?
It depends. Again, that comes down to where there is no legislation. It's different because it's you never really know what you're getting to an extent. You don't know how it's grown. You don't know if it's flushed properly. You don't know what chemicals are being used as it's grown, and all of that changes its effect. And also because it's not legal, you know, you smoke it. Smoking is not good for you. That's not a positive thing. You go to America and there, you know, where it is legalized now, you can get oils in vapes, you get medibles, like medical edibles, which are prescribed so as people don't have to smoke. And the benefits for cancer patients, you know, it gives people their appetite back. People who suffer with HIV and AIDS, there are a lot of positives, but there is definitely two sides.
Okay, and then we're exploring a film as well on child poverty, which is something obviously that you had an experience of when you were growing up, and you talk eloquently about it in your book. What are you hoping to achieve with that film? Do you want to explore?
Do you know what? Much the same with the first two is really just giving people a chance to see what's really going on. It's not. I've never been about shoving my opinions and what I think down someone's throat and telling them what they should think. I don't think, that or preaching is a way to get people to really care about anything. It's just giving people a chance to see into the different parts of the world and what's going on, and give them a chance to form their own opinions and make up their mind as to whether or not they care. Something I'm really, really quite passionate about is encouraging kids to think about this stuff as well, and try and help them be more compassionate, which is quite difficult when they're stuck to their phones all day long. You know what I mean? It's quite a scary time.
It is. I'm going to open up to you guys now for questions from the floor. So I think we might need a bit of lights come up a bit. Do we have a microphone?
Hi.
Hi, so I'm a really huge fan of the documentaries that you've created, and I
Thank you.
think the fact that even though thank you. And even though you said you didn't particularly want to have your own personal story told, do you think actually this is the most important way of getting across that, people we see in the public eye actually go through similar situations that us non-famous people go through? I know when I've been creating documentaries on mental health, the stuff that you put out was a huge influence, not just on me and my own personal mental health, but the documentaries I then created, which went on to help other people. Do you think that, the fact that, as I said, people who are in the public eye are putting this personal side across?
I think it's really important that people don't shirk their responsibilities, and we do start using our stage and our voice when we've got so many people listening and looking to us to try and do something a little bit more positive. And for me, it was just, I got myself into quite a comfortable place, and I just felt it was time to start using my voice for something other than just the benefit of myself. But I do think it's important that people do that, because it shows people that, because I think quite often we get put on a pedestal, especially by younger kids, and we're no different to anyone. And I think it's probably quite a relief for kids especially, and that was a large part of my book, is just if I had someone who told me, because someone can tell you it's going to be all right, but as a kid you grow up and there's a point when you realise that it isn't always going to be. But if someone who had been through a similar situation to me had been able to speak to me in the way that I perhaps could to someone who's going through it now, it would have been a great help. Because sometimes you don't see a way out of things.
Thank you.
I think the impact of that film was just amazing from the amount of correspondence we got from people in the BBC saying how much of an impact it had on their lives, and how much courage it gave them to speak up about how they were feeling. And even, it's really interesting, even within our team, we've got quite a young team on BBC Three, and I remember when we did that in Shoreditch, when we did that session with the Make Three guys and stuff, some of our team were down there and they were filming it, and they just said to me, I feel so proud to work for an area of the BBC, or the BBC that actually is willing to talk about this kind of stuff. And one of the guys actually said to me, which I was quite shocked by, he said in his previous job he was suffering from some mental health issues, and he said every time he had to go to see somebody, he had to lie about being physically ill. And I just think a film like that gives people the courage to be able to say, this is what's happening in my life. This is so important.
It's scary though, isn't it? Because a lot of people would probably be terrified of losing their jobs.
But that's it. I think that's it. There's a guy here in the third row up.
There's a couple of people over there as well.
You've got songs like Good Night, and you express different, it's the same story that you've expressed in your documentary. Did you feel any different expressing it through documentary as you did in music, and did you have a different feedback from audiences?
Yeah, do you know what? I think people, it's weird because people hear that song and they kind of get what it's about, but I think the film joined a lot of dots. I think people who saw the film and went back and then listened to the songs had a better understanding of what I was actually feeling. In the film, we had an hour, a song is 3 to 5 minutes, and it's quite difficult to fit everything into that. But it is different. I recorded that in private. I wrote it in private. And you're kind of, I get to hide behind the facade of Professor Green on stage when I perform it, so I can almost, you know, so it's difficult to all the time, but for a lot of it, I can remove myself from the emotions I felt when I first wrote that song. Whereas with the film, it's impossible. Like, even watching that earlier, it's still difficult.
Also, probably the way they're filmed. Sorry, I was just going to add, probably the way they're shot and filmed by directors and execs like Leila, is they're sort of, the amount of questioning constantly that they put into you doesn't allow you to sort of even, it doesn't allow you to get away with anything in a way. You're really having to think about it all the time, aren't you?
That's a good point. And with the song, I'm just sat there on my own. No one's asking me questions. I'm not telling anyone what they want to know. I'm just getting out what I say and feel at that time. Whereas in the film, I was made to think about things in ways that I never would have on my own.
Two guys up here, halfway up the last one.
I just want to say, with the documentary of Suicide Me, it was quite important to me, being an 18-year-old suffering with anxiety. At the moment, I'm just starting to recover from it as well, like with depression. Do you think it's important that people such as that should be important for younger people? For people to realise for younger people that anxiety is massively important, and you think it should be more out there?
Yeah, I think people should talk about it more. And if the documentary encouraged anything, I hope it just opened dialogue. And the important thing is to keep that dialogue open. I think we all suffer from anxieties and stresses. Anyone who doesn't is unlucky. I've had it my entire life, and I still suffer with it now. And I don't get to pick or choose when I'm anxious. It's so, sometimes I have no idea why I am, but I get that feeling in the pit of my stomach, and everything becomes, twice as hard. And it makes everything day to day a chore.
I mean, to me, because you're like a role model to me, because of the fact that I've got books, CDs, everything like that.
Thank you.
So, I keep going to school and say, you should listen to Professor Green, because in my opinion, you're more down to earth than other rappers that probably won't actually show their feelings. And I think it's just a massive advantage to you. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for...
No, respect, man. Thank you.
Guy just beside you there.
It's nice to hear stuff like that. Thank you.
Can I talk to you about dangerous dogs?
Yeah?
We had the very last legal American pit bull.
Wow.
That was allowed in. We got it from down London. And they were absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
We had to get him insured.
Yeah.
We had to get him muzzled.
Mm-hmm.
Tattooed.
Tattooed,
They were absolutely fantastic. He died when he was 7. He died of a tumour. But there's people, I think it's not the dogs, it's the people. And what you was talking about there was only 4 types banned. A lot of that was to do, like you said, with the type of people who actually had other dogs.
I think it was quite a lot to do with other breeds as well. It was the dog fighting that was taking place as well, because 3 of the breeds actually were not very popular in England at all.
Yeah, we're just a normal family, but obviously Samson were the best. We had 2 staffies.
Yeah.
They were perfect.
Yeah.
We had an American bulldog that weighed 11.5 stone, which you wouldn't want to. And we're just normal people. We've got a little cross staffy Jack Russell now, about that big. So it's not.
Be a bloody weird.
She's probably the worst of the. She's probably the worst of the lot because she thinks she's 11.5 stone.
Most Jack Russells do, don't they?
I just think that it would be a good thing for people to realise that what you're saying are American pit bulls now. They're actually not American pit bulls. They're Irish staffies, which are being bred and fetched over. It's a different kind of dog.
Yeah, do you know what is weird? There is still some American pits about.
There shouldn't be, because they should have all died out by now.
Forget what I just said. No, but I think the most important thing is just that any dog can be dangerous. I've been bitten by a German Shepherd, I've been bitten by a Jack Russell, I've never been bitten by a Staffy, a Pit, a Rottweiler, of which I was around a very large Rottweiler when I was a kid. it just does come down to being responsible, doesn't it? It's looking after your dog, it's knowing your dog. I had a Doberman who developed severe anxiety and aggression from that anxiety, and she wasn't good with children, and I tried for months to try and correct her behaviour, and I couldn't, and I wouldn't put her down, but I couldn't be with her every minute of every day because of work. So I had to take her back to a breeder, which broke my heart. I'd had her for 2 years. But she went back to the breeder, and the breeder rehomed her with a woman who lives on a farm, has horses, and she's happy as Larry now. You know, she's not an anxious dog anymore, but I couldn't give that dog what she needed, which was pretty much attention every minute of every day.
Anyone else? So, there's a gentleman here, and we'll come over here, just behind you there, yeah.
Hello. Hello, yeah. I'd like to thank all of you first. I think it's brilliant what you've done around mental health, and I think the light you've shone on it is really, really impressive. One thing I'd like to ask Stephen is, record industry bosses and stuff like that, how have they reacted to what you've been talking about? Because it's obviously quite a cutthroat world, isn't it? So
I don't talk to many recording label bosses because I don't like them. They take all my money. Do you know what? Yeah, I got a hell of a lot of messages from people at my old label Virgin, and everyone was just really proud. I think there was a really strong team at Virgin Records who I worked with for a long, long time, and that was a side of me that they hadn't seen. They'd known me, but they never knew that. There was also a lot of messages from a lot of people who have been or who are still affected by mental health issues. And yeah, no, everyone was just really, really supportive and really proud.
Great, that's good to hear.
Thank you.
I don't think there was one negative message, actually, because when it went out, it was trending on Twitter and trending on Facebook, even the next day, Suicide and Me. And you know how cruel those platforms can be, especially Twitter, and we really carefully monitored it, and there wasn't a single negative message.
Lady here first.
I'm a journalist, but I'm also a mental health professional as well.
Mm-hmm.
And from my experience, from being on various different psych wards, I still, despite there being different mental health documentaries which have been out over the years, I still think there's a hell of a lot of room for mental health documentaries, such as like self-harm ones and such like that, which hasn't really been approached. Is there any plans to do any more mental health documentaries?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I would like to continue doing. I think there's a lot of, I mean, the Suicide of Me was, I suppose, obvious for me to do because my father committing suicide, but there's a lot I'd like to explore and to draw attention to.
And I think just from a BBC Three point of view, this is our bread and butter. It's what we're there to do. We have to tell stories, I think, that are relevant to young people and their lives, and that help them understand themselves and understand their place in the world. That's what we do. And I think, you know, I said earlier when I was talking that we want to do films and make films that have a sense of purpose about them. So we will be exploring a lot more of these areas.
Despite my background, and not to take everybody back, but I actually watched The Suicide of Me when it first came out. But then also, more recently, about 6 months ago, my stepdad did take his own life as well. And I've watched it since, and it does need to be put out there.
Thank you.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah, no, you're right. I think there's loads more stories and to tell around mental health, and also I think it's really timely because there's so many more mental health cuts as well, and we are developing more sort of directly about mental health and about eating disorders and cutting, but also there's other series that we're doing on BBC Two, for example, about wider NHS and the cuts that it sort of has effect, the social, it has effects on the care that is happening in hospitals and paramedics as well that we're sort of looking at too. So we are trying to get it across as many channels. And
the one thing post it happening the one thing I found most shocking, even though I am a mental health professional, being on the other side of it, I find it quite shocking the lack of specialist help for people in that scenario. Basically, there's a charity called SOBS, I don't know if you heard about them, but it's not government funded at all, it's just a small charity, and that's the only place where people can go for anything specialised, and it's not specialist counselling or anything like that, it's basically support groups, and whilst it is very beneficial, the GPs, they're not able to do referrals or anything to any specialists.
Exactly. I think Stephen looks at that when he goes to the Matry. I always want to say Mayhew for some reason. Matry, I think he looks at that well there, because charities do pick up quite a lot of the work, and they obviously do an amazing job there of bringing it to local level.
A very unorthodox way of working as well, because everyone's a volunteer and they can disclose, whereas a doctor cannot. And I think was it 12 years they were open?
Yeah.
In 12 years of I think it was just over 1,000 patients they'd had through their doors, only 8 had gone on to take their lives, which is remarkable.
I also find it quite shocking, though, the fact that it's a well-known statistic that the suicide rate actually goes higher in families where you've had that occur, and yet there's such a lack of
support.
Yeah. You're right.
Thank you. Anybody else?
There's a lady.
There's a lady here. Then we'll come over here next.
Hiya. What story do you think the youth of Britain would like you to tell next? Sorry, that was just a fairly big one there. I'm a teacher and I've used the suicide documentary in school.
Okay.
And
how did the kids respond to it?
Amazingly, because it's not talked about. It's not talked about at all. We've had students that have lost their parents, all sorts of things like that. And I think there's a lot of stories from a lot of young people that are just not out there at the moment. So what do you think sort of...
Starting point for me is definitely child poverty, because I think there's so many kids who go to school in clothes that don't fit them, clothes that aren't washed, go to school and get the only meal they'll probably get that day. And none of this is really spoken about, and I think that's very, very... I mean, growing up's difficult enough anyway, isn't it, without something like having to, to deal with something like that. So I think that's the starting point for me.
And do you think it's getting worse? Do you think it's something that we think of as being kind of in the past? And I mean, I know it's not. I see it on a day-to-day basis, but do you think that sort of the sort of economy and the situations with benefit cuts and things like that, is that what you'll be looking at?
Well, it's going to get worse, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with homelessness. If, the planned cuts to benefits for 18 to 21-year-olds are put in place, there's going to be a lot of people who are just about paying their rent who are no longer going to be able to, and they're going to be back at the beginning of that cycle again. To be honest with you, I just think it's something that most people don't even think about. We've got enough to contend with in our own lives, and it's quite difficult to get people to start thinking about things and not just think about them, but to care and then want to do something to make a change.
I think people's perception of child poverty as well is that they'll see a child with a phone and they think, oh, actually, they're okay.
Yeah, homeless people have phones as well.
Yeah, and it's that kind of idea that, the students that I see on a day-to-day basis, many of them have got material objects, but still aren't getting fed, still aren't having those kind of things, and that sounds like it's going to be amazing, and like I'll be using it in school again quite a lot as well.
Thanks. Great stuff. The lady over here with the hat.
I'd just like to say, first of all, thanks very much for everything that you've actually done. Your documentaries are absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
I did 22 years in social work, but on street social work, and ended up gagged and having a nervous breakdown because of a lot of the issues that you've actually raised. What I'd like to be your documentaries is as well, they're empathetic, you can actually see the emotions you're going through, and it is actually a journey. When you're going to look at child poverty, obviously a lot of people you'll have met in the streets, a lot of the kids will have had mental health problems before they've even got to homelessness.
Yeah, I think the great thing about BBC Three being online now is that with the next film, Dangerous Dogs, we've got 2 short form films as well, with things that were filmed that we couldn't put in the actual film. And there's been things that we weren't able to, from the suicide documentary and the homelessness documentary, there were strands and other directions that we went off in that we weren't able to fit into the actual film. Whereas I think the great thing about it being online now is if we do film things with workers and and professionals, we can, if they don't fit inside the context of the film, because quite often the most powerful pieces of film come from people telling their stories. You know, not me telling someone else's story, but from, you know, someone telling the story themselves. But it means that we can then have another short form film, you know, including the professionals and the teachers and people like that.
I think there's an element for me with regards to even like children and young people that are receiving any kind of services. Even when you're actually meeting them, whether you're meeting them on the street or whatever, there is anybody that works with these kids, automatically they can only say so much, because you're really right, they will lose their jobs, or they will end up gagged in the same situation as myself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it is basically because they're all fighting for the same funding. And that includes charities, so your big charity.
We come across that we came across that with some charities and with workers where they couldn't really, you know, you could see them clam up, you know, the want to say what they really wanted to say, but the spiel that they had to give you. We got it from the police.
Yeah.
When we interviewed a policeman who looked after, who ran the Dangerous Dogs unit, it was just, you could tell he'd said everything that he'd said 1,000 times.
Is that something you would follow the threads upwards, though? So you're starting from grassroots level, maybe talking to the kids and actually taking right to Parliament level and going, well, actually, why is this the case?
Yeah, there's definitely...
No, where is the transparency, really, between our legislation, our policies, and actually what's happening with these kids on the ground, considering we've got 1 in 4 children in Britain that are actually living in extreme poverty.
Yeah.
And you're right, even as social workers, we know at the end of the day, you get into schools, that is the only meal these kids actually get. What happens when it comes to summer holidays?
Yeah, it's all stuff.
None of this is hidden from us, do you know what I mean? You deal with that kind of stuff on a daily basis, but for us it becomes very normalised.
Yeah.
Whereas actually,
of course, because you encounter it all the time, so you become desensitised.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have any? We've got one here. Could everyone else who wants to ask a question put their hands up when we get the microphones to you, because I think we're going to be shut down quite quickly.
Okay.
There's a gentleman here.
There's someone up there as well.
There's a lady here and someone up the back. Go ahead.
Hi, I'd just like to ask a question about the sort of craft of documentary presenting. So I was just wondering whether you would feel slightly fearful that you might become pigeonholed into a certain genre of documentary, as in you'd always be looking at sort of social deprivation, and do you fear that maybe one day you'd want to do a documentary on Caravaggio or something, and they say, sorry, that's not good role.
Caravaggio.
Yeah.
We're talking about that.
Yeah, actually, that had come up in discussion. No, do you know what? It's a conversation we've had, and like you know, like when my music first became popular, I Need You Tonight, Just Be Good to Green, Remedy, there was a lot of upbeat and cheeky stuff, and I want to get that side of my personality out as well. And also, if I can't keep doing documentaries that are that kind of, drain is the wrong word, but you know, that take that much from me and that stay with me that much, otherwise life would be dark. It's quite difficult because when you're immersed in filming something like that, it affects you. So yeah, I definitely want to, I don't want to get pigeonholed. There is stuff that I want to do outside of such. It'd be nice to do something that still has quite a serious undertone, but it would be nice to have some fun. Yeah, it really would. I think I might have some fun during the Wii documentary.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Cheers.
Where was the...
there was a lady up.
Hello. Just an editorial question. Ooh. I just wondered, am I right in saying you're an associate producer on your films? Is that right?
I haven't been yet.
Oh, sorry.
Still fighting for that one, though.
Okay. I just wondered editorially how involved
Thank you for asking that question.
No worries. That was definitely not a planted question then. How involved do you get editorially? You in the edit, and how does it work in terms of generating stories?
I get sent early versions of the films, and I throw my toys out the pram if there's something I don't like. That's kind of what happens. But I do want to become much more involved in it. Yeah, I care, you know, and I think as much as the programs are judged upon them being made by Antitode Films, as much as they're judged by them being a BBC Three program, I'm not a faceless journalist presenting information. I'm forming opinions and putting them across. So I'm very, very aware of the fact that I'm going to be judged by that as well. So I think it has to portray me in a way that I'm happy with. If it didn't, then I wouldn't be able to stand by the films that we made, then I always want to be able to.
That's the thing. I think it's kind of a process you go through. You know, as we start filming, we'll learn something new, or something will happen to one of the people who are in the film that we follow. You know, and that will kind of help us shape where the film's going. But it's very much, you know, it's, as Stephen said, it's his face and it's his voice. And because there is so much truth there and heart there, it does need to be real. I think us trying to edit you into some way that wasn't you, just, you could see it. And, you know, that's what makes his films so special, you know, that kind of rawness. And I think we would never do anything to take away from that.
No, and it's like I said before, the freedom I've been given and how collaborative the whole thing has been great. And for me, like, those pieces to camera, I present differently to other presenters, but the summaries at the end of a scene, you know, that's a conversation between me and someone behind the camera. And that's how I form opinions. And sometimes the guy behind the camera doesn't agree. But that's fine, because it's good to be challenged and it's good to be encouraged to think differently. But what wouldn't work for me is if someone behind the camera told me what to say. That wouldn't work.
Anybody else? The blonde lady here.
Which way are you voting in the EU and... Sorry, I'd just really like to just hear why you're voting in whichever way you're going.
Do you know what? I hate answering a question with a question, but which way are you voting and why?
I'm Brexit.
I could be a politician, couldn't I?
I'm Brexit, personally, but I just wanted to just see your views.
Why?
I believe we'll be stronger out. Trade, NHS.
Okay, we're not going to...
Yeah, there's another conversation.
There's no question.
Can we discuss religion as well? That's always a good one.
Anybody else before we close? There's a gentleman here, a lady here, and then...
A lady there.
Very quick question. You come across as an extremely non-judgmental person, which is extremely refreshing, and you're hugely honest. How do you juggle that with not, at the end of your interviews, coming to an opinion?
I think I do, really. I think on a situation maybe more so than a person, which is probably where the balance lies. I think, yes, you can have an opinion on a situation. If someone does something, you're also going to have an opinion on their actions. And, you know, what I said before is just what's really important is as long as I say to someone's face what I then go away and say on camera, I can do that and be okay with that because I'm not being two-faced. I'm not being all pally-pally and then going and saying, you know, I disagree with everything that guy does. And, you know, I think the honesty is the important part.
Yeah, your honesty radiates from you. That's just, it gives huge, massive legitimacy to what you're doing.
Thank you. Do you know what? I think that comes just from the way I wrote music, because I just figured that if I put everything in the music and I don't hide anything that I've done, then people can't drag my skeletons out the closet if I've already done it, you know what I mean? So here I am, no airs or graces. Take me as I come.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Lady here at the front. Lady at the front. Here.
Were you influenced by any other programs or filmmakers before making these documentaries?
I don't know. I kind of went into it as I do most things, even this. Like I was asked if I wanted to see the questions beforehand, and I was like, no, I just wing it. But I think that's what. But again, I think that the honesty comes from that, because you don't have time to make up answers. You don't, everything. But I like it that way. It keeps it interesting for everyone else as well as me.
So when you were growing up, did you know that it was always going to be music or films as well?
Nah, do you know what? I hated music at school. I could barely play a recorder. I never really had any. I was very academic. I didn't really have any creative expression. It was just that first time I started messing around freestyling with my mates that I realised I had a passion for words before that. I enjoyed reading and I loved rap music. I had my headphones on all the time. That was my, the place where I escaped. But I didn't know, no, not really. Not until I found it.
Lady there.
One.
Not a rap concert.
I'm going to get killed. I was told we have to finish at 4:45.
Oh,
but we'll
last
keep
one.
going until they stop.
What I was going to say is that the documentaries are great and they share a really powerful message with young people. And for future documentaries, would you consider like a multimedia approach? Because obviously you've got so many young people consuming content via social media nowadays. Like, is it specific streams, Snapchat?
Sounds like a pitch.
Oh, no.
Just kidding.
What ad agency do you work for?
I work for a talent agency.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably a question for you to answer.
Well, it's funny, it's funny you should say that, because I had a meeting on last week, which I think you know about this idea with a company which is absolutely nothing. It's not like these films at all, and it would be much more of. It wouldn't necessarily even be a visual thing. It might be audio thing. Might be. So we are looking at different ways of doing stuff with Stephen. So it won't necessarily in the future just be hard-hitting, immersive, though brilliant documentaries from Stephen.
Yeah. But I think just from my point of view, one of the things that by us being online now, it just allows us to try things in a different way. We did Life and Death Row, Love Triangle film, which we released as 10 short films. But around that, there was a whole array of content, not just video. So there was articles, there was maps, there was testimony, witness statements, so on and so forth. We're doing another one coming up in the middle of the summer. Called Unsolved, which is about a murder case from the Isle of Wight. So we're really exploring, and you know what? My feeling on this is we want to tell stories that are really important to young people and stories that can affect people's lives, and utterly open-minded about how we do it in terms of, what the form of the content or the platforms that it's on. That's what we're here to do in future, so we just have to get stuff out there as broadly as we can. So any ideas that break the kind of mould, we're up for talking about them.
I suppose with social media, you can actually include the young people themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just by sharing with them, but with them sharing with you, and that becoming part of something bigger.
Mm.
I've got a very vigorously flashing red light here. Do we have one more, or will we? Anyone else? This gentleman here, and then we'll finish.
Just some more.
They want to go home.
Yeah. What do you see for the future? Is it lots more kind of filmmaking, or at the expense of music? Or
Do you know what? At the moment, I've got my head down in the studio. I told my manager earlier that my phone's being switched off, and I don't want to hear from anyone or anybody unless it's got something to do with what's going on in the studio at the moment. We're working up ideas for new documentaries and stuff, but I think I have to be really clever with how I use my time, and rather than trying to shoot a documentary while trying to make an album, I need to kind of give time to music and time to the documentaries. And right now, for my own sanity, I need to have an outlet, and my outlet is music. So that's what I'm on at the moment.
The light is now solid red. So massive round of applause.
Thank you.